Inside Chicago's deadliest streets, true gang wars and murders revealed. The blood on Halsted Street. If you're brave enough to dive into the darkest corners of America's most dangerous streets, then smash that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Hit the like button if you think you can handle the truth, and drop a comment telling me which city's crime underworld we should expose next. Now let's go. The call came through at 2:47 a.m. on a frozen January morning in 2024. Chicago's West Side, Halsted Street. A body had been found in an alley behind an abandoned warehouse, and this wasn't just another statistic in a city drowning in violence. This was different. This was a message. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the scene with her partner, Marcus Williams, a 20-year veteran who had seen more death than most soldiers. The blue and red lights painted the brick walls in eerie colors as they ducked under the yellow tape. What they saw made even Marcus step back. The victim was a young man, no older than 22, wearing a black hoodie soaked in blood. But it wasn't the bullet wounds that caught their attention. It was a symbol carved into his chest, a crude drawing of a crown with 3 points. Marcus knew that symbol. Every cop in Chicago did. It belonged to the Latin Kings, one of the city's most ruthless gangs. "This is an execution," Marcus whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. Someone wanted to make an example. Sarah crouched down, examining the victim's hands. His knuckles were bruised, scraped raw. He had fought back, hard. She found his wallet tucked in his back pocket, still containing $200 in cash. Robbery wasn't the motive. She flipped open his ID. Jaden Torres, age 21. Address listed in Pilsen, a neighborhood caught in the crossfire of gang territory disputes. But something felt wrong. Sarah noticed a small piece of paper clutched in Jaden's frozen fist. She carefully pried his fingers open and pulled it free. It was a receipt from a pawn shop on 26th Street, dated just 6 hours before his death. Scrawled on the back in messy handwriting were 4 words that made her blood run cold. "They know I talked." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, reading the note. His jaw tightened. "We've got a snitch situation. Someone found out he was cooperating with someone, and they silenced him." "But cooperating with who?" Sarah asked. "There's no open investigation connected to his name in our system. I checked before we left the station." That's when they heard it. A phone buzzing in Jaden's front pocket. Sarah pulled it out carefully, watching as unknown number after unknown number flashed across the screen. 12 missed calls in the last hour. Someone was desperately trying to reach a dead man. Marcus bagged the phone as evidence, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling crawling up her spine. This wasn't a simple gang retaliation. The precision, the symbol, the timing, it all pointed to something bigger, something organized. As they loaded the body into the coroner's van, Sarah noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. She nudged Marcus and nodded toward the vehicle. Before they could approach, the SUV's tires screeched against the pavement, and it sped off into the night, leaving behind only the smell of burning rubber. Sarah pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, I need you to run traffic cameras on Halsted and Monroe. Black SUV, no plates visible, heading southbound." The radio crackled. "Copy that, detective." Marcus looked at his partner, concern etched across his weathered face. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Someone was watching us," Sarah replied, "and they wanted us to know it." Back at the precinct, they uploaded the photo from the crime scene into the database. That's when the computer pinged with a match. The crown symbol had appeared at 4 other murder scenes in the past 6 months, all victims between ages 19 and 25, all found in different neighborhoods across Chicago's south and west sides. But when they opened the locked case files to compare details, what they found inside changed everything. The web of lies. The case files revealed something that made Sarah's hands tremble as she flipped through the pages. All 5 victims, including Jaden Torres, had one thing in common that wasn't in any official police report. Each one had a small tattoo behind their left ear, a tattoo so subtle it would be missed unless you were specifically looking for it. A simple number, 17. Marcus stared at the crime scene photos spread across the conference room table, his coffee growing cold in his hand. What does 17 mean? A date? A code? Sarah pulled up the coroner's reports on her laptop. scanning through the details with laser focus. Look at this. All 5 victims had elevated levels of a rare chemical compound in their bloodstream, tetramethylpiperidine. It's used in pharmaceutical manufacturing, but it's also a component in certain industrial solvents. Where would someone come across that? Marcus asked. That's the question. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up business licenses and industrial sites across Chicago. Within minutes, she had a list of 7 locations that handled the chemical. 3 were legitimate pharmaceutical companies, 2 were cleaning supply warehouses, and 2 were supposedly abandoned factories in Englewood and back of the yards, neighborhoods where police rarely ventured without backup. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a text from the forensics lab. They had unlocked Jaden's phone. What they found inside made her grab her jacket and head for the door. Where are we going? Marcus called after her. Jaden had encrypted messages from someone using the name Prophet, and the last message was sent 10 minutes before he died. It says, "Warehouse on 47th. Bring the evidence. Come alone, or your family pays." They drove through the dark Chicago streets, passing boarded-up buildings and clusters of young men watching from street corners. The warehouse on 47th Street loomed ahead, a massive concrete structure with broken windows and graffiti covering every surface. Sarah could see a faint light flickering inside on the 2nd floor. Marcus radioed for backup, keeping his voice low. "We've got possible hostile situation. Need units to stage 2 blocks out, silent approach." They entered through a side door that had been pried open, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The smell hit them first, a mixture of chemicals, mold, and something else. Something metallic. Blood. The warehouse floor was littered with empty chemical drums, broken equipment, and makeshift workstations. Sarah recognized the setup immediately. This was a drug lab, but not for street-level narcotics. This was high-end, pharmaceutical-grade production. Someone was manufacturing something valuable, something worth killing for. They climbed the rusted metal stairs to the 2nd floor, each step groaning under their weight. The light grew brighter as they approached a large open room at the end of the corridor. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she raised her weapon, Marcus right behind her. Inside the room, they found a makeshift office, a desk covered in papers, a laptop still powered on, and dozens of photographs pinned to the walls. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the faces. All 5 murder victims, along with at least a dozen more young men and women she didn't recognize. Each photo had a red X marked through it or a date written underneath. Marcus moved to the laptop, his eyes widening as he read the screen. "Sarah, you need to see this. These are police reports. Internal police reports that should be locked behind 3 levels of security." Sarah looked over his shoulder, her stomach dropping. The reports detailed an ongoing federal investigation into a corrupt network operating inside the Chicago Police Department. Officers were being paid to protect drug manufacturing operations, to erase evidence, to warn criminals before raids. The investigation had been classified, known only to a handful of federal agents and top brass. Jaden wasn't just a gang member, Sarah whispered. He was a federal informant. They all were. That's when they heard footsteps behind them. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on concrete. Sarah and Marcus spun around, weapons drawn, but they were too late. 6 figures in tactical gear emerged from the shadows. Faces covered, weapons raised. "Drop your guns, detectives." A voice commanded, electronically distorted. "You've stumbled into something much bigger than a few dead gang members." Sarah's mind raced. Backup was 2 blocks away, but these weren't street thugs. These were trained professionals, moving with military precision. She lowered her weapon slowly, Marcus doing the same. The leader stepped forward, removing his mask. Sarah's entire world tilted. It was Lieutenant Frank Garrison, a decorated officer with 30 years on the force, a man she had respected, a man she had trusted. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Chen," Frank said, his voice cold and emotionless. "But you've just become a liability." Marcus lunged forward, but 2 of the tactical team members grabbed him, forcing him to his knees. Sarah tried to reach for her backup weapon, but Frank was faster, pressing his gun against her temple. "The 17 on their ears," Frank explained, almost casually. It represents the 17th precinct. Our precinct. These kids thought they were working for the feds, feeding information about gang activity. They had no idea they were actually mapping out our entire operation, documenting everything we built over the last 5 years. You're killing children to protect the drug empire, Sarah spat, rage burning in her chest. I'm protecting my retirement, my family's future, and the futures of 20 good cops who deserve better than a pension that won't pay the bills, Frank replied. The city is broken, Chun. We're just taking our piece before it all falls apart. He nodded to his team. Take them to the river. Make it look like they got caught in a gang crossfire. Tragic, but believable. As they dragged Sarah and Marcus toward the stairs, Sarah's radio suddenly crackled to life. A voice came through, loud and clear. All units, we have confirmation. Execute warrants now. Repeat, execute warrants now. Frank's face went pale. What did you do? Sarah smiled through her fear. Before we came in, I sent everything we found to the FBI field office. Every file, every photo, every name. You're done, Frank. The sound of sirens filled the air, dozens of them, converging from every direction. Frank's team looked at each other, panic spreading. The warehouse was surrounded, but Frank didn't lower his weapon. Instead, he pressed it harder against Sarah's head, his hand shaking with rage. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Marcus shouted, lunging forward, but the sound of the gunshot echoed to the warehouse, and everything went black. The final betrayal. The bullet never came. Sarah opened her eyes to see Frank Garrison on the ground, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. Behind him stood Marcus, holding a backup piece he kept hidden in his ankle holster. The tactical team froze, their weapons wavering as the sound of boots thundered up the warehouse stairs. FBI agents in full tactical gear flooded the room, shouting commands. Hands up, drop your weapons. On the ground, now. Frank's men surrendered immediately, realizing the game was over. Sarah watched as they were cuffed one by one, their faces a mixture of fear and resignation. Federal agents secured the laptop, the documents, every piece of evidence that would dismantle the entire corrupt network. Marcus helped Sarah to her feet, his hands shaking from adrenaline. You okay? She nodded, still processing how close they had come to ending up in the Chicago River. How did you know he'd go for me first? 30 years of watching men like him, Marcus replied quietly. They always underestimate women. Always. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres approached them, her expression grim. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Detectives Chun and Williams, I need you both to come with me. We have a situation. They followed her down to the warehouse floor, where more agents were photographing evidence and bagging chemicals. Rebecca led them to a corner, where a hidden door had been revealed behind a false wall. Beyond it was a small room, no bigger than a closet, with a metal chair bolted to the floor and dried blood staining the concrete. We found this based on coordinates in the laptop files, Rebecca explained. This is where they brought the informants before killing them. They tortured them for information, trying to find out who else they'd talked to, what they'd revealed. Sarah felt sick. Jaden Torres had sat in that chair, knowing he was going to die, probably begging for his life. All because he thought he was doing the right thing. Rebecca pulled out her phone, showing them a photo. We also found this hidden in the laptop's encrypted files. Recognize him. Sarah's blood went cold. The photo showed a man in an expensive suit shaking hands with Frank Garrison at what looked like a charity fundraiser. The man was Alderman Richard Voss, one of Chicago's most prominent politicians, a man who built his career on anti-crime platforms and community safety initiatives. Voss was funding the entire operation, Rebecca continued. The drug profits were being laundered through his real estate developments. He'd buy up properties in gang territories for pennies, clean the money through renovations, then flip them for massive profits. Frank and his crew provided protection and eliminated anyone who threatened to expose the pipeline. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. How deep does this go? We've identified 23 officers across 5 precincts, including 2 captains and a deputy chief. We estimate they've been operating for at least 7 years, maybe longer. The 17 tattoo was their way of marking informants they'd recruited, kids they promised protection and money in exchange for information about rival gangs. Once the kids had given them everything useful, they became liabilities. Sarah thought about Jaden's note. They know I talked. He hadn't been talking to the gangs. He'd been talking to real federal agents, trying to expose the corrupt cops who manipulated him. That's why they killed him. What about the families? Sarah asked. Jaden's last message mentioned his family would pay. Rebecca's expression darkened. We have protective details on all the victims' families as of 2 hours ago. But Detective Chen, there's something else you need to know. She pulled up another file on her phone, and Sarah's heart stopped. It was a surveillance photo of her own apartment building, time-stamped from 3 days ago. A man in dark clothes was standing outside, watching her windows. They've been tracking you for weeks, Rebecca said quietly. Ever since you started asking questions about the Latin King's symbol appearing at multiple crime scenes. Frank knew you were smart enough to connect the dots eventually. Tonight was supposed to be your last night. The weight of those words settled on Sarah like a physical force. She'd been walking around with a target on her back and never knew it. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah and Marcus gave their statements, handed over everything they'd documented, and watched as the largest corruption scandal in Chicago Police Department history unfolded on every news channel. By sunrise, 23 officers were in federal custody. Alderman Voss had been arrested at his lakefront mansion, and the city was reeling. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood at Jaden Torres's grave in Mount Hope Cemetery. His mother, Maria, stood beside her, clutching a photo of her son to her chest. 6 other families were there too, families of the young informants who'd been murdered for trying to do the right thing. He wanted to be a teacher, Maria said softly, her voice breaking. He told me he was working with police to make the neighborhood safer. I was so proud of him. I never knew they'd turn him into bait. Sarah had no words that could ease that pain. Nothing she could say would bring Jaden back or erase the corruption that had stolen his life. As the families laid flowers on the graves, Marcus approached Sarah. The FBI wants us to join their task force. They're tracking down every case Frank's unit touched over the last 7 years. Could be hundreds of wrongful convictions, planted evidence, murdered witnesses. Sarah looked out across the cemetery at the rows of headstones stretching into the distance. How many of them were victims of the same corruption? How many families had been destroyed by officers who were supposed to protect them? I'll do it, she said. Someone has to fight for them. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, reviewing the final case file. The FBI had recovered Frank Garrison's personal records, and hidden among them was a list of names with dates next to them. Future targets. People who were asking too many questions, digging too deep. Sarah's name was on that list, scheduled for elimination in 2 weeks. But it wasn't the only familiar name. At the bottom of the list, dated for next month, was another name that made her blood run cold, Marcus Williams. She grabbed her phone, ready to call her partner, when she noticed something, a small detail she'd missed before. The list had been created 4 months ago, before they'd even started investigating Jaden's murder, before they'd stumbled into the warehouse, which meant someone had told Frank they'd be a problem long before they became one. Someone inside the department had marked them for death months in advance. Sarah's hand shook as she scrolled through her contacts, wondering who she could trust. The corruption hadn't ended with 23 arrests. It had just exposed the surface. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You found the list. Good. Now ask yourself who gave it to the FBI. And ask yourself why Marcus's name was on it when he's been Frank's friend for 20 years. Some betrayals run deeper than you think. Watch your back, detective. Sarah stared at the message as it disappeared from her screen, auto-deleting after 15 seconds. She looked at Marcus's name in her contacts, her finger hovering over the call button. Outside her window, a black SUV sat idling across the street, engine running, windows tinted dark, just like the one from the night Jaden Torres died, the same one that had been watching her for weeks. Sarah grabbed her gun from the safe, checked the magazine, and moved away from the windows. The war for Chicago streets was far from over. and she just realized she might be fighting enemies on both sides. In this city, the line between cop and criminal had never been thinner, and trust was the deadliest weapon of all. If this story left you questioning everything, then you understand why Chicago's streets run red with secrets that will never make the news. The real crime isn't always what you see. Sometimes it's who's watching from the shadows. Stay vigilant, stay suspicious, and never forget that the badge doesn't always mean protection.